Hello and welcome to Apex Instant Tips, episode 123, the world's most popular 5-minute tip show that's brought to you on Fridays at 12:05 Eastern Time.
Why not? Certainly.
Yes, well, certainly one of the most popular. Welcome, Hayden. Glad you could be with us today on Apex Instant Tips.
Yes, excited to be here, and I come bearing the good news that I was able to apply some of the wisdom of this show this week, and I'm here to talk about it.
It's always great when the tip is timely, something that we've just done in the last week. So what is it you were able to do with Apex?
So the tip is if you have a custom homegrown solution for handling role assignments, you can drop that table and use Apex ACL, access control.
And so we're going to be able to demonstrate this in just 5 minutes. We also have a puzzler for after the 5 minutes. So I encourage you to stick around for the puzzler, mostly because we don't have an answer to it. And so we're hoping somebody else might.
Yeah, we need help.
All right, so we only have 5 minutes. How are we going to drop a table from our system?
Precisely. So I want to call attention to the fact that let's demystify this by way of example. When you create a new application, one of the bells and whistles that is made available to you is something called access control. So if I check that.
Mm-hmm. And while it's creating, click start on that timer, so we're not cheating.
Yeah. So it's going to create a few things by default that are easy to reproduce in your own application, as we'll see, if you want to add it to an existing application. So what I want to focus on is the fact that it has created 3 entries under application access control under shared components. So we have an admin role, a contributor role, and a reader role, and it has auto defaulted me to the admin role because because I created the application.
Okay. And so these are roles. They're not authorization schemes.
These are roles. And there's a big difference between roles and authorization schemes. The key thing being that you might have an authorization scheme completely separate without using access control at all. In fact, you probably do. Essentially, anywhere in your application, if you let me just log in quickly. Just to make it clear, against almost every component, there is the opportunity to select an authorization scheme. And so here
but I see authorization schemes here that look like roles: administrator rights, contributor rights, reader rights. What's the difference between the authorization scheme that we see here and the role?
Right. So irrespective of whether you use an ACL, you probably use authorization schemes. But the way you've configured your authorization schemes can make use of your ACL. So these authorization schemes are somewhat analogous to the roles. There are three roles, 3 authorization schemes. If we take a look at how administration rights works, we can see that it uses is in role or group. If you're using a table to handle role assignments, you might instead have exists SQL query or something to that effect.
Okay, so this one is a one-to-one mapping. You've got administration rights to your administrator role. What about contributors?
Yeah, so this one is very straightforward. Contribution rights is a touch more interesting. It adds 2 roles to the logic of is in role or group, implying that if you're an admin, you are implicitly also a contributor. So it is therefore redundant to give someone contributor rights if they're already an admin.
All right, so there's this many-to-many relationship between authorizations and roles, or authorizations can be completely different altogether.
And then the final authorization scheme configuration is maybe the most interesting of all. It handles it uses PL SQL. So it in fact makes no reference to the reader role. It first asks the question, is access control scope being used to define whether or not someone has reader role? So what that refers to is in the admin page that was auto-created for you, under access control, you can answer whether or not you want the reader role to be defined by whether or not you have access control, whether or not someone is using, is already defined in the access control.
Right, and you said reader role, but actually it's not. It's the reader authorization scheme, and that's the distinction, right?
Yes.
We like to think of roles and authorization schemes the same way, but in fact, this authorization scheme is any role, or if this is flipped on.
Right. So it'll first answer the question, is this flipped on? And if the answer is it's using the access control list, then it's going to actually make use of the access control list API. And it's going to make use of the function has user any roles, which returns a Boolean, which for a given user, if it has any role at all, you can, it'll return yes. So by implication, the reader role that was created is never directly referenced. It could be any role at all.
And so you mentioned that you were able to drop a table. I'm guessing you use this API somehow to migrate the data?
That's right. So if we navigate over to the Apex ACL API, we can see that there are plenty of facilities to help you manage this. What you could do to replace your table would be to loop through the roles of your table and make use of this signature here. So by row, you would you would essentially add user role. So now we're at time, but I'll just finish my statement. You would define the username of the application and the role that you want to give to that user.
All right, so excellent. I think that covers ACLs in 5 minutes. I'll say I've always been, well, when I first looked at this, it was this mapping between roles and authorization schemes that didn't make immediate sense to me, but that's a good description of it, that they work hand in hand, but they're not the same. You can have authorization schemes and a whole bunch of other things.
Yes, and I at the top of the episode, I mentioned that I was applying wisdom from the episode, from our show. What I meant by that is we have a running theme of advocating for using the Apex declarative tools in lieu of your homegrown solutions.
The very first episode we ever had was don't store preferences in your own tables, just make use of Apex preferences. So the very first show. And then last week, about list of values, not having your own CG ref codes or something of that nature. You can do it right with the
Precisely right. And I can't say what a joy it is to be able to drop a table because it's one fewer thing you have to deploy, one fewer table that you have to worry about handling data for. Yeah. So that is that to me speaks of the value of that wisdom.
Well, so I'll say if you just came in for 5 minutes and you want to skip our puzzler, you beat it now. We'll ramble on for a couple more seconds about our puzzler. So the puzzler is actually very closely related to this episode. This API, the APIs are always being worked on. This Apex ACL API, I noticed when we were getting ready for the episode that 23.1 added a new procedure or function to, I think it's a function to the API. Let's take a look at the function.
Yes, if we could share my screen again. This function is a new function. It at least didn't exist in the Apex 18 version. So someone is asking for this, and someone probably uses it, but it's what it does is entirely mystifying to me.
So it takes 4 parameters: the application ID, the username, a role static ID, so administrator in this case, and then the numeric IDs of a list of roles. And it explains what it's trying to do, but in the explanation, I am mystified. the best I can guess is that you're answering the question, is the administrator role in the example in one of these lists of IDs? But if that's true,
What is the username?
what's the username for? I don't know. I'm just mystified as to
It
what.
would, yeah, if there were one fewer parameters.
So Plum, I think is responding. There's a history of all previous actions. I don't think so. I don't think that's what's going on. I mean, certainly reading the text associated with this is just puts my brain.
Yeah,
in a
if there are one fewer parameters, if you were to drop either username, role static ID, or role IDs, it could begin to make sense. But without all three of them together, it's not clear how they interplay.
So I will say this function may be extremely useful, but I'd like to know how.
Yeah, so if you have any guesses, or if you know, please let us know as well.
Yeah, put in the comments that this is what this function does, and then maybe if the comments actually explain it, we can get it into the Apex documentation in a way that's understandable to me anyway. All right, so I think that was fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, Hayden, great to see you again. I'm away next week, so I think there won't be any tip next week.
Well, sounds good to me.
All right, so we'll see folks in 2 weeks, and then once again claim that it happens every week.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.